perhaps many people listening, like they have been living someone else's life and directive for a while and really getting clear on what do you want and why do you want it? And are you willing to enter into that? That's where the real growth happens.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hey RX Friends We Got This podcast, where we share our thoughts on the pharmacy profession, experiences as healthcare providers, and explore our identities as two women of color going after it all.
As we share our stories, we hope you laugh, maybe cry, and feel inspired as you get to know us. Because at the end of the day, friends, remember, we got this.
We got this. Hello, everyone. Hey, Sally. How's it going?
Pretty good. We're excited. We are really excited because this is our first guest that we are having on our show. And I am really excited that it's this person because I feel like I have had him alongside with me in my entrepreneurial journey. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, we have Tim Ulbrich, the financial pharmacist.
We should have done like a drum roll, but yay, welcome, Tim.
Thank you so much. I am so excited for this conversation. I love the work that the two of you are doing. Keep doing this. You got it, and I'm honored to be here as your first guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Definitely. So Tim, you have started Your Financial Pharmacist. Could you tell us a little bit about the beginning stages? Why do you think this is something that other pharmacists need? And then we can go down to the nitty-gritty of, all the little tidbits that you have for us.
Yes.
I would love to. And I started Your Financial Pharmacist in 2015. So we're now coming up on 9 years on the journey, which is super exciting. And there have been highs and lows. I often think about entrepreneurship as a roller coaster. And I say second to my four boys, entrepreneurship has taught me more about myself than anything else. It really does challenge you to stretch and grow and tap into your full potential. Doesn't mean it's easy by any means, but it really does stretch and challenge you to grow in ways that you couldn't imagine. And 2015 was an important milestone for that. So I graduated from pharmacy school in 2008. Went to a direct entry 06 program. Wish I had a great story of why pharmacy. I don't. My parents said you're going to go to school. You must go to college. And ironically, I grew up in small business and a family business my grandfather started. And I think because of the highs and lows of business, my dad kind of said, unsaid, was like, I don't necessarily want you to go down this pathway. Go the traditional pathway, go to school. Now, I've ended up back in that pathway, right? So that's how things go. And I love science. I love math. And a guidance counselor said, hey, have you thought about pharmacy? And I looked at it, looked like a good career trajectory, a good income, good options. So I went that path. Lo and behold, that's a big decision to make financially, as well as just career projection when you're 18 years old. So I come out when I'm 24. I did a year of residency, fell in love with teaching during my year of residency. So I went into academia, spent about 10 years in a couple different academic roles, doing a ton of fun things. Loved that work. And simultaneously, when I was about 6 years into my academic career, when my debt payoff journey really got to a certain point, I started the work that we're now doing at Your Financial Pharmacist. So I, like many graduates, came out with way too much student loan debt, a couple $100,000, which is all too normal in our profession. And I had no clue what I was doing. It really felt like monopoly money when I was in school. And I found myself, my wife Jess and I, we've got four boys, about 3-4 years into our journey, we had this nagging feeling of like, hey, we make a good income, but it doesn't feel like that. Like this feels like it's way harder than it needs to be. What's not working here? And for us, it really was the student loan piece that was such a barrier to us being able to progress financially. And so, long story short, we worked through that journey. I'm making it sound way easier than it was for the sake of time. And a month after we hit submit on that very last payment of the student loan debt, I started blogging about my own journey because I've loved this topic. I love to teach. And I kept hearing from pharmacists all across the country things like, yeah, I feel that way too. And I didn't realize there are, options, or I feel like I need more information when it comes to this topic. I have a doctorate level education in pharmacy, but I feel like I have a kindergarten level education in finance, right? And so I just kept teaching and sharing my journey. And that eventually led to a podcast and a book. And we now offer one-on-one financial planning, tax services. I have a team of certified financial planners led by my partner, Tim Baker, who's a certified financial planner. So regardless of where someone is in their career, new practitioner to retirement, whether they want to learn about paying off student loan debt, investing, retirement planning, everything in between, we're trying to help pharmacists on that path towards achieving financial freedom. And it really started with my own journey. And it wasn't until 2020 that I left that full-time work in academia, most recently at Ohio State, to work full-time on the business.
Wow.
The Ohio State.
The
Oh, so I
Ohio
know.
State. Tim, you know better than that.
Seriously, yes.
Excuse me, where's the the?
Where is the Ohio State? They do not miss that. They correct every single time.
I know. I used to kind of roll my eyes at it, but I just felt like the need to do it today for some reason. I love your story, Tim, and it reminds me a lot of myself, my own pharmacy journey, and I think a lot of people can also relate to it. The student
Absolutely.
loan portion of it is quite significant, and yeah, I would love to, dive all into that. But before we get started, if you are watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to us. It really helps if you do, helps our numbers, it helps us look good. I mean, help us look good, please.
Let's look good, please.
Write in the comments below what you thought was really interesting about this conversation, especially about financial freedom. I know that's a buzzword that everybody is kind of using and throwing around these days. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please like and leave a review and share. And
Yes.
also tell the people why we are your pharmacy best friends, but also why we're so fun to listen to while you're driving around or walking your dog or doing just really boring chores. We're here to lift your life up a little bit.
Yes. And we're here to, even though we promised you weren't going to learn here, today's episode, we really are diving into the learning component because
Maybe we should stop saying that we don't teach people stuff, because I think we do.
I think we do. They tell us that we teach them despite not being a priority for us. But
Yeah.
today's episode, I think we're both super excited because we will learn. And I don't
I'm
speak
gonna
just for
learn.
myself, right?
Well, here's the thing, like there's so many different financial advisors out there, and I always get bombarded with them on LinkedIn,
Totally.
especially,
Mhm.
but
True.
I kind of want somebody who's also in pharmacy to speak the
Uh-huh.
language that I speak. And that's why it's really important to, have people who kind of interweb in all of these different industries, I suppose. But I do want to play. I kind of threw this out there to Tim. I said I wanted to play an icebreaker game, and he is willing to indulge us. And
Of
so
course.
let's do it. So, Sally, did you read the email about my idea?
I did.
Okay, so Tim's gonna give us one statement, whether it's a truth or a lie about himself, and we each get two questions, whether we want to use up those two questions or not, and then we get to decide, or individually, what we think, if it's a truth or a lie, and then we'll see who wins, basically.
Oh boy. Here
We get competitive on here.
It's okay.
Let's go, Tim.
All right, truth or lie. So I actually had a hard time planning for this because I have some odd food eating habits. I'm a very picky eater, although that's changed a little bit as I've aged a little bit. So I was going to go something in that direction. I decided not to though. So I've kept it in pharmacy.
Oh, you
So
did. Okay.
my statement is that I have verified or checked, whatever you want to say. I have verified less than 50 prescriptions in my 16-year pharmacy career.
What? I have no questions. That is not true.
I think that's true, but I know. I was like, I don't have any questions either. That's true. You don't think that's true? Wait, let's ask at least one question each.
I don't have.
Well, okay, so Tim said that he mainly worked in academia.
I'm not changing my answer, even though now, as I think about it, it maybe.
But I feel like, well, let me see. Like, how many prescriptions have had, if I didn't go into clinical practice, and even if when I was in clinical practice, I didn't verify that many compared to like an
That's
inpatient
true.
pharmacist, you know what I mean?
That's true.
But
Because I think
50 is
the
very
word
low.
50 is super low, right? But also, keyword, I think the operative word is checked. You can't check
Wait, no, he
prescriptions
said
until,
verified.
yeah, verify or check, right? Until
Yeah.
you're a licensed pharmacist. He has not been a licensed pharmacist in a community setting ever. That's why
Do
I
we
think,
know that? Have you ever
yeah,
worked in a
I think you
community?
have questions, don't you? Don't you have a
we
We're
we
just
said,
making all these assumptions about
That
him.
sounds like a great question to ask.
Yeah.
have you ever been in a community setting since becoming a licensed pharmacist?
Yes, both in my residency, I was in an AmCare clinic that we had a small, but we had a pharmacy inside of the clinic. And then in my first academic role, I was shared 25% of my time with a regional community pharmacy.
Wait. I'm gonna ask another question. What was the toughest order to verify?
Ooh, do you remember that?
Yeah. One that you're like, I hate this.
I have no memory of verifying prescription.
That's
That says
funny.
something. Um, all right. Well, okay, then what's your answer? Sally.
My answer.
Or sorry, Sally. What is your
Okay.
so you
It's
still
still
sticking
false. I'm still sticking with false.
you're saying he has verified more than 50
More than 50.
prescriptions.
Yes.
I'm gonna say true just because it's such a weird thing to say as a
Right, right?
pharmacist.
It's rather
So it's a red
specific.
flag to me already. Okay, Tim, let us know.
So I have verified more than 50, but it's
Oh,
less than 100.
ah,
Ah.
Uh,
dang it. 50 is
so
pretty low.
I was
57.
thinking of some people, that's probably what, an hour, 2 hours of their shift, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very, yeah,
So
Yeah.
like
here's
minutes.
why I chose this one, okay? Because I think for many of your listeners, I get the chance to talk to pharmacists every day in the work that I do, which I absolutely love. And I see a lot of career identity crisis going on
Yes.
out there where people may have a perception that was put upon them
Mhm.
of what it means to be a pharmacist or what it means to be successful. And
Mhm.
for those that are in community practice or other roles where obviously verifying prescriptions is a big role and that's a good fit for them, awesome. Like keep doing that is a critical need and function of our profession. But when I think about my career path, I struggled for the first 5 years with some identity crisis because I wasn't tied to practice. And I felt this nudge. Like I knew my
Mhm.
interests were elsewhere in more of the
Yeah.
business administrative academic side, but I felt this expectation like I had to fulfill this certain role that aligned with my PharmD and my residency training. And it
Oh,
wasn't until I really owned kind of what I was feeling
yeah.
of what I knew aligned with my strengths and interests that I was really able to let that go. And I often think about the career path. I think a lot of new graduates, they feel this pressure to kind of get on a path and keep
Yes.
running down that path.
Mhm.
And mine has kind of been like run down a path, come back, go on down a different path, run down that path, come back, go down a different path. It feels more like a rock wall, right? Than it does like climbing a ladder.
Yeah.
And I think that can feel very stressful with the
Yeah.
pressure that people self-inflict or others inflict upon them. So I wanted to bring that into the conversation as well as I think that's really relevant.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Very, very.
It,
I over identify with that. It's just like I've decided that this is what I'm gonna do. Well, you better go all in. Meanwhile, there was this other idea and interest that I was afraid for a very long time, just straight up. I was afraid to try for a long time. Then when I was finally ready to try, it just felt like I was so far out of my depth and
Hmm.
didn't think that there was room to learn along the way. And so I think our audience will definitely identify with all of what you just said.
I mean, on this show, we talk about wanting to live an interesting life rather than
Hmm.
a perfect
Perfect
life.
I love
And an
that.
interesting life does mean that you run around a lot, constantly just trying to figure out what it is that you want for your life and not necessarily just doing the most easy thing.
Yeah.
So, well,
Ooh.
this is really great. All right, Tim. Well, now that we know a little bit more about you and your background, especially in pharmacy, let's get into the financial aspect of it. What kinds of things? So I guess the first question that I thought of is that so I graduated in 2014
Okay.
and life looked a lot different back then. What are some challenges that new graduates or just new pharmacists are running into now in terms of their financial planning and aspects?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I feel that as well. Graduating 2008, there's a point where I can provide some really good education and teaching, but I can't relate to the same level of today's challenges because they're different. They're unique and they're real right now, right? So when we look at some of the top things that I'm seeing, student loan debt is of course the gorilla in the room, right? When I talk to a group of new practitioners and I say, "Hey, what's your number one financial concern or priority?" Student loan debt always wins the day. If we look at the data, there's actually some interesting trends happening. When we look at how much debt graduating students have, it's actually trending down over the last couple of years. It was on a pretty significant upward trend for, as long as I've looked at that data. As a point of reference, in 2010, the average debt load is about 100,000. It went up to over 170,000 right around the pandemic, and now it's trending down. And we could talk about potentially why that's the case, but that's a big number. And
Yes.
I think sometimes we forget about how big of a number it is and how intentional we have to be with repayment and all the options that are out there. So that's a big one. The other one that I'm seeing is home buying right now.
Mm,
When I bought a home in 2009, 2010, and then we eventually moved to Columbus in 2018. It's a different market with home prices, no matter where you live in the country, and interest rates. And what we see is that pharmacists' incomes, they have gone up. But if you look at inflation, which would be another thing, right, that's very different right now. If you look at inflation, you could argue that pharmacist salaries in many cases aren't keeping up with the pace of inflation, even though the actual number is going up, right? So they might think, hey, I'm earning more money. But when you look at, 7% interest rates instead of 3%, rising costs of goods, the purchasing power of that income isn't the same that it was in
yeah.
2014 or 2008. So we have these downward pressures that are happening on new practitioners' incomes, and there's others, certainly what I call these big rocks of fixed costs. So
Mm,
at the end of the day, achieving our financial goals comes down to having cash flow and discretionary income,
mm,
right? And when you look at these big rocks, a student loan payment, a mortgage payment, or a rent payment. Another one I commonly see would be daycare payments,
yeah.
childcare costs, right? These
Yes.
become, in many cases, 70, 80+% of a pharmacist's take home pay and fixed costs. And all of a sudden, they have this nagging feeling that I had in my own journey of, hey, I make a good income, but it doesn't feel like that, right?
Mm,
It's not. And there are some real factors today: housing prices, inflation, student loans, daycare costs, other things that are really contributing to those feelings.
Yeah,
I
I'm
know.
getting anxious as you're talking about it right now.
It's a, it's a real, I love the analogy you just used with these fixed income, fixed expenses that we have in our lives. I think that when I first thought about budgeting, because
Mm,
which is something I think, please, I know you're passionate about that. And my sentiments was, as a resident, I don't make enough
yeah.
to save. I'm not making enough money to save. I'm making enough to be able to pay my rent, make sure I can get to and from work every day,
Yeah.
and that I'm not eating peanut butter and jelly for an entire year. That was the goal, right? There was no child. I was in Philly. There was no real need for a car. I left my car at home. But can you help us understand a little bit how our mindset and our relationship with whatever we are earning, are there really opportunities? The direct question here is,
Mm.
are there opportunities for us to critically evaluate our finances and be able to put something away? How does one start working or thinking about that?
Yeah, and before I get to the real me, let me address the more important thing, which is peanut butter and jelly is my favorite. I eat peanut butter and jelly every day for lunch. Okay, so don't be hating on peanut butter and jelly.
Oh, every day.
Fun fact, every day,
Wait,
every
what kind
day.
of jelly? Strawberry? Grape?
I'm a like a Smucker's grape jelly kind of guy.
I like a
So
Oh my,
peach jelly.
a
oh
peach
goodness.
jelly.
That's my
Okay.
favorite.
I
Um,
I'm the only
So
one here that couldn't tell you what their favorite is because I don't like any of them.
Toasted bread.
Twisted bread,
toasted
that's the
bread with
key.
Pete, you're just throwing a bunch of wrenches in the system. I mean, with four boys, I can like line them up and like sandwich,
Ah!
sandwich, 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 you know?
Yeah.
Um, so Sally, you said something that I think is the real depth of the question and the work, which is the hardest thing to do, and that's mindset, right?
Yeah.
That's mindset. So when we talk about the financial plan, I think one of the things financial advisors get wrong too often is we're so focused on the X's and O's because
Mm,
that's where it's comfortable. Where
mm,
it's not comfortable is the layer lower, which is the mindset. Because so much of handling our money, whether it's paying down debt, saving for a large purchase, putting one money away, investing for the future, it really comes down to a lot of behavior and a lot of mindset. And a lot of that lives in our subconscious that we're not even aware of.
true.
And where that comes from is how we were raised and the environment
Yes.
around us when we grew up. You know, there
Yes.
are psychologists that their career's work is to study money. And when you look
Wow.
at their work, they call these money scripts. We all have them. We all have
Mhm.
them. These are the scripts that we grew up with that inform how we approach money today. And sometimes those are healthy, sometimes those are not healthy. And
Mm,
before we get into the X's and O's, there's two really important things we have to do. We have to understand what are those money scripts? What are they? Do we see them?
mm,
And can you see the through line to how you are handling your money today? Because the first step to change is understanding and reflecting on what those actually are. The second thing is we have to get clear on what does it actually mean to be living our own rich life? Not what other people are doing, not what other people think we should be doing. What does it mean for you individually? Money is a tool. Money is a tool
it
that
is.
when we talk about living a rich life, there is no right or wrong answer, but often the answers I hear are, hey, it's about experiences, it's about travel, it's about giving, it's about doing these things that money allows us to do those things. And before we talk about, putting money in a 401k and optimizing our student loan repayment strategy, like, so what? What are we trying to do? Like, if
Yeah.
we get there, why does that matter? And we
Matter.
have to get clear on that, or else we're going to get burned out with the financial plan. So, do I believe, to answer your question directly, do I believe that people can, carve out money and save and invest for the future? First, let me say everyone's situation is different, right? I live in the Midwest where housing is still somewhat affordable. I cannot
Mm,
relate to someone who's trying to buy a house in the Northeast or in California on a farm. So it's different, right? I can't
yeah.
project whether or not they can do that, but we can look at different parts of the financial plan. So everyone's situation is different, but I would argue mindset
Yeah.
is the key. And sometimes the goal is to kind of just steady the ship and keep
Mm,
our mindset ready for the future. So you mentioned residency, right? One of the most
yeah.
common things I see happen in residency, no judgment, I was there, I did the same thing, is we throw up our hands and we're like, I can't do anything, I'll worry about it later.
Correct.
That might be
Hmm.
partially true. I mean, I made $31,000 as a resident. Thankfully, they pay residents a lot more than that now. Not a whole lot more, but more than
Yeah.
that. And I had that mindset. And while mathematically it was true that the
Mm,
budget didn't allow me to do a whole lot, that didn't mean I couldn't learn. That didn't mean I couldn't
oh,
develop a system. That didn't mean
yeah.
I couldn't be ready for
Yeah.
when those numbers increase. So that we have to be careful about that because while
Yeah.
there's financial truth to that, that mindset can be dangerous. And then that creeps into that first 3, 5, 7 years where we're a new practitioner, we're finally earning, right, that bigger income.
Yeah.
And that's the place where we can start to play offense. And that's the window where it's critical we build a strong financial foundation.
I
Oh,
had to learn quite a bit during my first year of residency because it was my first year where I'm managing like a salary for myself, like an
Mm-hmm.
actual income. In pharmacy school, you go to work, but you don't make enough money to actually make it count. So a lot of it is monopoly money in the sense that you get this,
That's right.
fund or whatever scholarship, whether it be a grant or loans.
mhm.
I remember when I first started living on my own, I moved from Phoenix or Arizona to Indiana, and it was a different, financially, it was like like the Midwest, yeah, it's a lot different than in Arizona, but I would say that, I didn't have a roommate because I was just moving somewhere I didn't know anybody. And
Mm,
I just was like getting all this money all of a sudden. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can spend it on a new wardrobe, for work or whatever. And I really had to learn very quickly that no, you have to learn how to budget. You have to figure out what your salary can give you in terms of like just food and lifestyle and what that may look like.
Yeah.
But I had to learn kind of a hard way in a way. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I ran out of money. And then I had to figure out student loans too, which luckily we were able to defer that during residency. But still, yeah, it hit me all at once very fast, and I had to learn that immediately. So, are there any specific advice you have, Tim, for people who are going to start their residency, who are moving somewhere new? Maybe they haven't found a roommate, which I'm like, it was too late for me to figure that out. You know, by the time I'm like, oh, I have no money, it was too late for me to find a roommate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. And maybe we can come back to this, but for many people, deferment is an interesting topic and discussion. We can come back to that with student loans and forgiveness and some other options and pathways. But, to answer your question, for those that are in that postgraduate training period, right, residency, fellowship, whatever might be going on at that point, I think it comes back to, we've said budget a couple times. If we could go back to that, I like to call it a system because
Okay.
because here's why, right? I think the word budget just it doesn't resonate with a lot of people. And yeah, right. It brings up, when I ask people, hey, like word associate budget, right? Restriction. It's telling me what I can't do and how I need to be, more diligent here. And the way I like to think of budget, you're going to think this is super nerdy, but I like to think of the budget as simply the mechanism or the plan by which we're achieving whatever vision we've set,
That is
right?
incredibly nerdy, Tim.
It is nerdy, but it really
Yeah, I need
is.
to like take some time to dissect what you just said.
So if we have, I always tell people, start with the vision, not the budget. Okay, start with the
Gotcha.
vision, not the budget. So if we can get clear on what does success look like over the next 12 months, 24 months, whatever time period, right? And that tends to be
Yeah.
shorter term as we're just getting started. The budget then is simply the roadmap or the game plan to actually make that happen. And the
Yeah.
reason why that mindset shift is important is people get excited about a vision.
Mm.
People get excited about achieving goals. They don't get
Yeah.
excited about getting a spreadsheet. Typically, there are some out there, right, that do enjoy that. And I like to actually treat the budget in a much more proactive way than typically is done, where whatever goals we define, that might be something as boring as saving for an emergency fund. It might be something more exciting like saving for a home purchase or paying off debt or whatever, to actually bring those goals into the budget and treat them as an expense. So if you were to say, hey, Tim, I really want to go on this vacation next summer to Italy, right? We're going to kind of look at all the financial plan. This is really, for me, a part of living a rich life. All right, couple things we need to do, right? Obviously, we got to look at the whole situation. What's the potential budget? What's this going to cost? How much time do we have to save? And then let's actually create a bucket that's called Italy,
Yeah.
right? And start putting it in the budget, just like you would a car payment, just like you would a utility payment. And we start to
Yeah.
pay ourselves towards that goal. And I think that mindset shift,
Yeah.
we feel momentum, we feel progress, and we don't feel as much of that, restriction type of component. And, Ramit Sethi talks about this, one of my favorite teachers in personal finance. He talks about this in the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, that, we think of, again, the budget as restricting, but he refers to it as money dials. So find the things that you actually care about financially that bring you feelings of joy and gratitude, and prioritize those, and stop spending on the things that you don't actually care about. And while that sounds obvious, many of us spend money on things that when we really dig deeper, we don't care a whole lot about, but we just
Yeah.
kind of get in those behaviors or habits,
True.
right? So for me, as one example, like I could care less about cars.
Mm.
Doesn't matter to me. Like, no judgment for people that do like cars. If that's a money dial, like, prioritize it, right? For
Yeah.
me, it's like it's point A, it's point B. My boys are playing roller hockey in the driveway. A puck's going to hit the car. It's going to get scratched. It's going to get dent. Like, I cannot care about cars in this season of life, and I don't. So I got to dial that down and kind of not prioritize that, and figure out the things that do mean the most, experiences, other types of things with their family, and dial those up and prioritize those. And those are the pieces that we have to get clear on, what are those things for you individually, and then making sure the system, the plan prioritizes those things.
Gosh, that's so profound. I'm not the one in this relationship that's good with money. I don't know if you could guess that already or not, but I'm not the one. But thank God that he is way more conscious and way more meticulous in how this whole thing works. But I love the idea of creating a bucket to pay myself, right? Like if I wanted us to go to Jamaica, which is like my favorite vacation spot, creating an actual bucket and treating
Yeah,
it like my reward, like you're working hard and built this bucket so you can have a phenomenal
that's right.
experience when you go to Jamaica and stuff like that. I really love that. And this dial system of I don't care about that too much, we can dial that down, but I care
Hmm.
about this a lot. You teach me so much
You
because
know,
I
in
know
the
nothing.
And what I like about what you just said there is in order to get comfortable with the dial concept, you have to really know yourself and kind of stop with the external validation or what are other
Yeah.
people, thinking, which is a whole nother set of work, right, that we've got to focus on. But
Mm-hmm.
the bucket thing is such an easy but impactful win.
Yeah.
We use an online bank that easily allows you to create buckets within a high yield savings account. So
Oh,
there's a bucket for, we have a family trip to Norway next summer that we're planning. So there's a bucket that's called Norway. And it might be a fat zero, right? But it's the reminder of
yeah.
kind of what we're trying to do. There's a bucket for, the basement remodel that we want to do in the next 12 months. There's a bucket for, when we're working on a not so exciting thing, like we got to repair the roof in a few years. So it's important because while the dollars in total don't change,
Mm.
one of the things I often see is we lump savings into one account and we do the mental accounting like, hey,
Yeah.
of that 30,000, 10,000 is for an emergency fund, 5,000 is for this, 5,000 is for that. And what we encourage people to do is like, if you're already doing the mental accounting, do the actual accounting. Like
Yeah.
create the bucket, name it, because when you name it and you see it, all of a sudden that really accelerates our likelihood of achieving that goal.
So true.
Yeah, I really like that. It's like
Yeah.
a organization, and
Yeah.
that does help a lot of pharmacists to kind of see visually as
Yeah.
someone who need like that visual reminder.
Yeah.
Um, my question is, so I wrote a post the other day on LinkedIn, and it was about, if I get to do it over again, I would have I would have taken like 2 months off after residency before starting school
Mm.
or before starting job. Don't go back to school. Before starting a new job. And how would you recommend somebody budget for like that 2 month period off? Like,
Yeah.
where do you look in your spending? And like, instead of buying whatever the new shirt, or I don't know what people buy, honestly, but like instead of buying that, you put it in this bucket that is like a 2 month
Yeah.
fun time. Like that's what I would
Yes.
probably categorize it.
Yes.
So where would you look in your spending, and then how do you decide you know, what to do
Yeah.
what?
So almost like a pre-career sabbatical, I concept
Yes.
I'm hearing. I
That's how
like
Totally.
it
it.
felt.
Yeah.
Totally.
Let me ask you a question back. Like, why does that matter? So when you were to
Mm.
say, hey, I want to take 2 months off, or as I reflect back, if I do it all over again, I would
Yeah.
have taken 2 months off for a set. What gets you excited or energized? Why?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is that I realized that, working for 10 years, that PTO is very precious. And this is the perfect time in your
Yeah.
career to just take a quick break as long as you can before then you're going to jump in and work continuously for 10 years likely.
Absolutely.
That's the path that most people take. So, and that's the path that I took. And of course you could definitely take breaks in between, your career and all that, but I just feel like this is the easiest time because it's a
It's
natural break.
it is. And it's also, excuse me, as a person who actually did take the time, I think I didn't realize the impact it would have had on
Mm,
the pharmacist I would resurface as. I took it because for health reasons, it was imperative. Mentally, I was
mm-hmm.
done, but also my health had started to fail and I needed to gain perspective. Would a PGY2 really be the best thing to do right now, or can I take a break, reevaluate in a year? I can do a PGY2 anytime. There are no rules that say that if I don't do it right after a PGY1, it's off the board. So I was forced to take the 2 months off because of my life circumstances, but it ended up really helping me gain perspective. So the question of why that's important, I think that I had time to reflect. I planned. I actually took time to write out my 1 to 3 professional goals and personal goals and knew that in 3 years I wanted to be married. So it was time for a really difficult conversation with a 3-year boyfriend.
Oh God.
Right?
Do the
Like,
kids
Is he
still
listening?
say what do they define the
which
relationship? No, that's not it.
yeah, it was just like, where is this going? Because in
Yeah.
3 years, I need to know what
Oh
is going
God.
to happen. But I had quiet time, and no alarm to wake up to or anything to sit and think about what I really and
Yeah.
truly wanted, absent faculty advisors, residency advisors, co-residence advice. But that's to get some perspective. I had to take it. And I know that Thu was posting as a person who wished she had.
Yeah.
And I had posted as a person who actually did and the difference he made for me.
Yeah. I mean, I still took a 10-day trip to Japan, which was such an amazing time. And I loved it, but now 10 years later I'm working in pharmacy and I'm like, I wish I could just take 2 months off
I
to
know.
travel a little bit more or to stay somewhere for a long time and get a different experience in life. Just like you're no longer so focused on building this career and it's like, oh, now I get to kind of chill. And I was like,
Yeah.
that would have been a really good time for me to have a lot of that experience. So then now I wouldn't be like, what if? So anyways.
Yeah.
And what I hear there is the answer to the technical question lies in the why. That's what I'm trying to drive home here, right? So Simon Sinek taught us this and start with why.
Mm,
If you're not clear on your why, your how and your what is going to be fuzzy. And we
mhm.
so often focus on the what. What should I do with the budget? What should I do with this? But we don't look closely at the why, what's behind that. So when I hear the 10-day trip to Japan, if we had more time, I'd ask you like, hey, what were the experiences that you remember from that? What were the emotions and the feelings that come up? What were the things that
Yeah.
you're going to look back and do the rocking chair exercise when you're 75 or 80 and say, I am so glad I spent X on that
Yeah.
Yeah.
because the money is noise, the memory is everything, right?
Yes.
And that
Totally.
is what, so when you say, how does somebody potentially take a gap, whether it's 2 months or a year? I remember I did an interview with Nick Ornella, which is available on our podcast. He's a pharmacist that lives in Cincinnati, worked with Walgreens, still works with Walgreens. He took a year off as a new practitioner. He worked for a while, took a year off,
Wow.
was able to negotiate that with Walgreens to travel the world. That was his living his rich life. And then he came back.
Wow.
And, his concept was, hey, we have this outdated idea of retirement, this idea that we're going to just grind and work for 30 or 40 years and then just
Yeah.
stop working.
Yeah.
Whoever said that needs to happen, right? And so he really kind of believes in more of that Tim Ferriss mindset of, mini retirements along the way or sabbaticals or whatever you want to call them. Here you're talking about one at the
Wow.
front end of your career. And so if we're clear on our why, and I hear the compelling vision that you're describing, like then other things in the budget, that becomes easy decisions because, the things that might get in the way, whether that's buying things or eating out or doing
Yeah.
whatever, like let's just look at it as a priority, right? The one of those you're going to remember the experience and one you're not. So, I think
Yeah.
that's where we get to making some of the tough decisions as we look at the discretionary expenses, but we look at them in a not a restrictive way, but in a I'm making this choice not
Mhm.
to spend here because I want to put it here in something that I know is actually going to bring true joy and align
Mm.
with my why.
Yeah, I
That is
mean,
so
just
cool.
talking to Tim now, I feel like he's one of us because on our podcast, we always talk about very big ideas of
Yeah.
like, do you want to do a residency and what kind of residency? Well, it's what you feel like is the best option for you. You don't always have to do what everybody wants you to
Yeah.
do or that you think you should do. It's what
Mhm.
is fitting to your goal in your life. And I think you're avoiding like very specific advice at this
Yeah.
time because it's a bigger picture of what is fitting individual people and everybody's going to make different choices.
A
Well,
hundred
and it's
percent.
comfortable, if we're honest with ourselves, it's comfortable to live in the technical weeds and
Yeah.
decisions. It's uncomfortable where the real growth happens, which is in some of these bigger questions, right? Because many of us, perhaps many people listening, like they have been living someone else's life and directive for a while and really getting clear on what do you want and why do you want it?
Mm.
And are you willing to enter into that? Like that starts to surface, some emotions of fear and I'm scared and I'm anxious and other things.
Yeah.
But you both know like that's where the real growth happens. And so Yeah, I mean, I think partly I'm trying to encourage people to step back and think a little bit bigger because it's the bigger vision that informs the technical decisions. But I would
Yeah.
also challenge, like, if you're in the technical weeds and that's where you want to be, like, is that because it's comfortable to be
Mm.
there?
It's so true.
Totally. I
You
feel
said
like
a
I'm in therapy
sentence.
right now.
I know, money therapy with Tim.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, can we have
yeah,
that as like a
right?
returning?
It's a whole segment that needs
It
to be
is.
recurrent. You just said a sentence that I think hit me hard, but also I think should be on a t-shirt at a conference. It says, money is the noise and the experience is lasting or important.
Hmm.
Wait, did he said that just now?
He said it just now, too. You have to find it. You have to find it
I'm
when we go back.
digesting. I'm
Yeah,
still digesting what I'm learning, so maybe I missed that.
it just hit me was like the rocking chair analogy. You're not going to remember how much it cost, but you will absolutely remember how you felt being in Japan, the things you saw, the
That's right.
people you saw, the stories and the people you interacted with. I love that. There is something that I really wanted you to touch on. Did you see that? Dude, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Um, we spend a lot of money as pharmacists to surface a certain way. What do I mean by this? Naplex MPJE for most of us, non-negotiables.
I was
Yeah.
like, you need that.
You need that. Like I don't care how broke you are, have a yard sale, but you need to find a way to pay for your licensure, non-negotiable. But then there are all these other expenses that happen thereafter. We absolutely have a choice. We like to by we, I mean we like to think that we have no choice in these expenses, board certifications, membership,
I
profession.
I
Yeah.
actually looked this up last night for
Did you?
myself. Yes.
Okay.
So
Because I have a
I
number that someone told me too.
what's your number?
There's a person that I'm close with who's a member of almost every reputable pharmacy and recognized
Oh
pharmacy
boy.
organization. And she
Wow.
says that she spends about $4,000 a year.
Oh, that's okay. Because the calculation that I have, 4,000 is, I thought you were going to say 10,000.
Really?
Okay, so I was going to say yesterday when I was looking up a new graduate who wants to get board certified and then wants to be a member of one national organization and one local organization, I calculated it to be, and I'm using like the cheaper membership price for a brand new practitioner. It's around $3,828. I like have like very specific numbers, and that's kind of rounded up already too. So if you're a new
Wow.
practitioner and you want all of these things board
Yeah.
certified, so that means you have to pay for the exam, you have to pay
Yes.
for the study materials, I'm
Yes.
assuming.
Hmm.
Membership for ASHP is around $178 for a new member, but then if you want to go to mid-year, which is kind of where the nitty gritty, like all the networking and connection
Yes.
is, that's I estimated $1,500. And then for local, it's
That's
around
conservative.
$150. And then for that annual meeting for the local organization, because I'm assuming if you're a member, you want to go to these events, right?
Hmm.
It's roughly around $800. So then the total was going to be around $4,000 for
Yeah.
that year that they're spending, which is a
Yeah.
lot, which is a lot
That's
of
a lot.
money. And
That's a lot
I
of
mean,
money.
would we recommend people doing this? And I guess the answer, or the answer that Tim would probably throw out is, why do you want these things, right?
Correct. We've learned that.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Look at me,
learning. We're
I'm
good
learning.
listeners. We're good little students, Tim. It would depend on what you envision
He
for
is shocked.
yourself, right? And your money dial. That's how you're going to figure out if you should invest in this.
I
And
mean,
I
what
think,
would you tell, someone who's coming to you, like a mentee, for example, like they're like,
yeah,
I want to do all these things. And I guess if we're talking about the whys with them, what would be some questions you would ask
some
them?
questions you have for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're spot on, right? I got a couple thoughts. I think the why is the obvious one, and we don't need to rehash that. I think I've beat that dead. But again, like what's the value? What's the why behind it, and what's your return on investment? And let's remember, every financial decision we make has an opportunity cost tied with it.
Yep.
Okay. So just as I was just running some quick numbers, if you're looking at about $4,000 a year, let's say that's on average about $350 per month ish, right?
Yeah.
If you were to instead, not saying they should do this, if you were instead to take that money and put it in an investment account earning 7% a year, you're looking at over $500,000 into the future, right? So there's an opportunity cost to any decision we make. Now, I am a avid believer in professional development and making that an investment
Mhm.
as a part of your budget. Easier said than done, right? We just talked about all the reasons that we're competing with, financially, but I'm a big believer of prioritizing that as a line item in your
Yeah.
budget and making that a priority if there's a ROI and if there's a
Yeah.
reason why. Now, the other thing I want to say is pharmacists are terrible negotiators, like perhaps the worst. Love my pharmacy friends. They are just not great at advocating for themselves. So my first question is, if you're talking about a lot of these things that is going to directly or indirectly value your employer, like, are we asking for
Yeah.
help in these things? And the idea that blanket, like, they won't pay for these, like, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. Everything is negotiable. And if you are providing tremendous value to your organization, then you are an asset. Doesn't mean you're going to get everything you want. You are an asset and you have leverage to negotiate. You have
Yeah.
to understand when you do and don't have leverage. And I'm
Yeah.
not just talking about salary. Yes, that needs to happen. Back to where we started the conversation. A lot of pharmacists think they're getting a raise. It's not even keeping up with cost of living adjustments. That's not a raise if you're a top performing employee. So, yes, we need to advocate for salary. But if I'm doing a lot of these activities and things that are going to provide value to my employer, then am I negotiating some of that? Am I able to offload that as a cost of mine and be able to demonstrate why that's of value to my employer? And there's a lot of strategy and technique and things that you can do to go there and get comfortable with that skill, as you employ that. The other thing I want to mention, though, is, are there other opportunities beyond pharmacy? So I think one of the things I have fallen into the trap as a
Mhm.
pharmacist is, like, I live in this pharmacist box,
Mhm.
or I have lived in that pharmacist box. And what I have come to realize over time is I really value my association involvement and meetings and networks, and I participate in that, and I will continue to do that. But I also get a ton of value on professional development activities, coaches, experiences, groups, communities that have nothing to do with pharmacy. And
Mm.
so, like, are we thinking too linearly when we
Yeah.
talk about this professional development, and really kind of taking a step back to say, what growth am I trying to achieve? And then
Mhm.
where am I going to get that both within the profession as well as other opportunities?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever thought about that. I'm guilty of that. I believe all of my professional development opportunities exist within just the pharmacy realm when I'm doing so much more now. Like, I'm exposing myself to the tech startup world and learning that that's an
Yeah,
entire universe that
That's
exists.
another whole
It's
conversation
a
also.
whole
Because
nother
yeah, when you start branching out of
universe. Yeah.
pharmacy, it's
But
your eyes are open wide with
totally.
possibilities though.
yeah,
It's like this is amazing. And I always
it
tell
is.
pharmacists to get out of the bubble.
Oh my God. I know Thu wanted to get into loans.
Did I?
No?
Yes.
What a
Student
wet
loans.
blanket that
Like,
is.
he
My
said
gosh.
the big one,
The
student
big
loans.
one. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. My loan journey is a little bit different than other people, I think, because my dad worked at the university where
Mm,
I was going to pharmacy school, so he was able to help me quite a bit with the loans portion of it. But so I ended up with less loans than I think the average pharmacist, but at the same time, it's still a decent amount that I have to figure out and pay off. But I was really lucky too because I lived with my parents. So in terms of, a
Oh,
lot of cost savings, I was able to do a lot of that. Not even super intentionally, but it was just
hmm.
something that my parents had really um, recommended for me. So,
yeah,
what about you, Sally? I know that that's something that you've struggled or with,
I have.
just
So,
recognizing that during the pandemic when you didn't have to pay your loans, that you were like,
yeah,
this is how much I could save and make
save.
without it. Yeah.
It it hit us hard because I think both been so aggressive and driven about how we wanted to get rid of it
Hmm.
since we both have it. But I did live away from home. School was 2.5 hours away, but I only took enough loans to cover tuition. I wanted to work and cover my life expenses. And my family pitched in as well. So, like, my sister paid for my cell phone. Like, my dad would help with food and allowances. Family pitched in here and there. And, like, my rent, that's what I worked. That was my responsibility. And I know that that made a difference in just my loans being strictly on tuition, where my husband, it was the whole thing, life, everything.
Yeah.
He took all of what was available. But when the pandemic hit and they suspended it, it it was I was angry. I became very angry when I realized that we as a couple, what we were putting into pay to loan repayment, in 2 years, we were able to accumulate enough for a down loan on our first home. Um,
Totally.
it was eye-opening, and we realized how big of a burden this thing was for us financially. So I think your overview of how serious of a thing it is, first of all, but also like, what are some ways and things that people should be thinking about that we are not when it comes to how we can really get this ugly monkey off our backs?
Yeah, and what we see is for new practitioners, especially assuming they're in the realm of the average debt load, right? 160 to 170-ish. We know some people, we've worked with individuals that have upwards of $500,000 of debt, and then people that have no debt, right? For, family help, scholarships, whatever. And so the point being there is everyone's situation is different. And so if we're assuming the average, debt load, we often say that student loans for new practitioners really are the tail that wags the dog financially. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that if you look at the average debt load, $170,000, and if you put that on the standard 10-year repayment, I won't bore your audience with like all of the repayment options or plans. You're talking about an $1,800 to $2,000 a month monthly
Mhm.
payment for 120 payments or 10 years,
Yeah.
right? If you look at the average pharmacist take home pay around $7,000, we're looking at 25, 30%
Yeah.
of take home pay on that standard payment, not even talking about any other expenses or costs, right? So we have to first lock in what is your keyword, your optimized student loan repayment strategy, not your colleagues, not your friends, not the default option, right?
Mhm.
Because there are options that you can pay it off as quickly as you want. And we have featured some of these stories on our podcast where people said, I don't want it. It's emotionally causing me stress, anxiety. You used the word anger, Sally. And
Mhm.
so, we had a pharmacist who paid off $345,000 of debt in less than 5 years. That is a lot of money. It's a big monthly payment, right? But you also have the option to take it out 25 years or to get loan forgiveness and
Yeah.
everything in between. And that can be the difference of a monthly payment of $2,000 to $3,000 per month or a monthly payment of a few $100s per month, depending on where you work, how much debt you have, how you feel about the debt, what the interest rates are. And it's a system that, for better or for worse, there are so many options to consider. And what we see is paralysis in those options, right? Because we already have the emotions of anger and fear and anxiety. And then
Yeah.
we have all these options to consider. Does forgiveness make sense? Does it not? What about income driven repayment plans? What about the new save plan, right? There's new information coming out every day. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed
Yeah.
and confused. I don't know what to do. But we have to enter into this space and figure out for you individually, what is the best repayment option? What does that mean for the plan? What does that mean for the monthly payment?
Yeah.
Then we build around it. Then we
Yeah.
go from there. And it's overwhelming, it's stressful, it's big. But when we can enter into that space, on the other side of that, we now have something we can work with. So if we determine that, let's say the best repayment plan for you is a public service loan forgiveness strategy, and we're going to optimize the heck out of that, and you're going to pay $400 a month because we're going to go for tax-free forgiveness.
Yeah.
Once we make that decision, we run the math, not to say it goes away, but we mentally can move beyond it and say, all
Yeah.
right, what are we going to, now we've determined that's the best plan. Let's work with the rest of the budget. Let's talk about your other goals, saving and investing for the future, or other priorities and goals that you have. And we can do that with confidence, knowing that this black cloud, we've kind of at least opened up a little bit, put some light on it, and are able to move forward in the planning.
Yeah.
It
Oh.
sounds like an individual, like a personalized plan, is really the
Yes.
key here.
You touched on something and like went right over it. Part of our audience, they're new practitioners. They are going to be faced with their first job negotiations. And we've established that we are not good at this because, and also, many of us think that negotiations are all about the salary and it doesn't go beyond that.
Hmm.
Can we please get some information or insight about negotiation and myth or truth that if you negotiate your salary, you're sending the message that all you care about is money. Because that's my biggest reservation. I don't want that to be the perception, but I also want to be compensated fairly for my skill.
Why can't you worry about money though? Like
I
why
was
can't
just gonna
that
go there.
be
Thank you.
I was gonna say like if that I mean if that's part of your life goals and if that's who you are, why do you have to be ashamed of that?
I think it's cultural, right? For me, like growing up in the house where both parents' careers were service based, it's about what you can do for the world. It's about using
Mm.
your gifts and who you are to improve other people. And for them, money was more of we need it so that we can live out our purpose to help people and make the world around us better. I think that that conditioning has a huge role to play with how I see my relationship with money. And especially when I'm asking other people to give it to me. And my sister would be here rolling her eyes. You're not asking them to give it to you, you're going to earn it, you know, and I get all that.
So there's remember how we talked about money script, right? There's an interesting money script here. And the challenge I would have to reflect on is like, can you both make the world better and advocate for yourself financially? Can both of those things be true?
Yeah.
Right? And I think just you saying that out loud and reflecting on it is huge because we're putting a light on it. And then I think from that place, when we go to negotiate, we can realize like, hey, that's not necessarily me, myself. That's a part of me
Yeah.
that I've kind of learned and grown with, and I can be aware of that and then move from that position of strength. So that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. Technically or tactically speaking, and not that this is meant to be a therapy session podcast, but all of this goes back like you're never going to effectively negotiate if you don't believe in yourself, period. It's going to come through.
And
It's
Yeah.
I
going to
think
come
that we
through.
should have this therapy podcast episode soon because I also have, as like we're talking about things like one of the things that come up for me is that my parents, they love saving money. And I spend money, but I also have this weird thing where if I've saved my money, it's really hard for me to spend that money
Yeah,
or
Oh,
even use it and invest it. I'm like, oh, but I've worked so hard to
that's
like
right.
save this much money. And so then like I'm like, oh, sure, I can
um,
put it in a high yield savings account. I can do all these things. I can like invest it. But I'm like, but it's so nice sitting in this account. It looks so lovely. I can't move
oh,
it. And that is my paralyzed thing for my
oh,
own
that's
financial
so,
mindset and scripts, I would
That's an
say. So
incredible awareness again, right? And
yeah,
kind of reflecting on like obviously saving and investing is a value, and so is spending and experiencing it. Both of those things can be true. I tend to be on the same kind of space of where you are, and it's been a learned skill
yeah,
to be comfortable. And my wife has just been an incredible teacher in this area of like the balance, right? That can be there. And this is why a lot of people struggle in retirement. We talk about accumulation,
yeah,
save, 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 get to a number, a big scary number, 2, 3, $4 million. We're like, how do I do that? But I'm just going to keep saving, saving, saving. What we don't talk about is all of a sudden you might stop working and you actually start to spend down your savings,
yeah,
which there's a whole technical strategy in how you distribute that money, but there's also an important emotional piece of getting comfortable with spending because you've been saving this whole time, right? And
yeah,
so, I think that what I'm getting to with negotiation here is if there's not a belief in yourself, you can employ all the technical skills of negotiation that are possible, and you should practice them, and they might be somewhat effective, but their full effectiveness is going to be limited if you're not doing a lot of that inner work and kind of really evaluating some of those limiting beliefs that are there. And so I would point Never Split the Difference is an incredible book written by Chris
mm,
Voss, has great negotiation strategies in it. That he's a former international FBI hostage negotiator. Incredible story that took his experiences and kind of brought them into real world business types of things and figured out that different audience obviously, but it works.
Yeah.
And so there's some real technical strategies I think a lot of pharmacists will like, right? The script,
Mm.
in terms of being able to, ask good questions and mirroring and, doing things like an accusation audit and other types of strategies where you're going to put yourself in a position, but it really does start with the mindset component. And to Sally's point, it's salaries that the thing we focus on, but there's a lot more to negotiate, beyond the salary.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah. No,
Cool,
I
cool.
there's so many opportunities here that we can hopefully have Tim come back to our show and do a whole thing. But yeah, I honestly would be very open to having Tim be my financial therapist. And we
Absolutely.
can
This
Financial.
is
Are we
fun.
if he's
giving
willing.
him? Are we
What?
giving him, Tim, a new occupation, the financial
I'm just,
therapist?
yeah, but it's so wild because it's interesting how much money does tie in with like mental health and your mindset
Absolutely.
is so wild. So it would be amazing. I know. So unfortunately, we have to cut this conversation at this time because Saleh's got things to do. I gotta go to
I'm
work.
so sorry. I
What?
have my grand rounds
Yeah, you
presentation
have a
today,
hard
but
stop, right?
yeah, I have a hard stop, but I was not gonna miss or reschedule this for nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much, Tim. And it's what I always say, like, if I connect with Tim, I learn something new.
Hmm.
And today I learned like 5 new things. But it's I feel like I've been exposed to your content for a really, really long time. And every time I learn those new things and I apply it, I see it right away. I was a student when I first met Tim, a student, a baby pharmacist, a baby
a
pharmacist in the
neonate
making.
pharmacist.
I know. And I think like I just love that you're doing this full time now and how encouraging you are and challenging pharmacists to shift the way we think about ourselves, money and money's role in our lives. I wanted to express that gratitude for your voice in this
Hmm.
space, and I know for sure it's been very beneficial for me on both a
Yeah.
personal, professional, and business wide because I reach out to you about all of it.
And I know, Tim, you said that you have a book. It's called The Seven Figure Pharmacist. Where
Yes.
could people find that book and download it for themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, yourfinancialpharmacist.com. It's also available on Amazon, and I would love to have the chance to connect on LinkedIn to continue the conversation as well. You can find me there, Tim
Perfect.
Ulbrich. So this has
And
been
you have
fun.
your Financial Pharmacist podcast. I'm sure it's available everywhere. Is that right?
It is. It's on our website every Thursday, new episodes, and then we do a periodic real estate show on Saturdays. Also, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to shows.
Amazing. Look at that. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. If this episode speaks to you and you think others may benefit from hearing our stories, please send it to them. Share our show so that we can grow and reach more people. This episode is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can connect with Saleh and I on social media. Our handles will be in the description, down in the show description below. And until next time, don't forget, everybody,
We got
we got
this.
this, Tim.
Bye, Tim. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Every